Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's member exclusive webinar with Kerry Harrison. So before we get started, I'll give you a little bit of information about Kerry and also how you can get maximum value from today's session. So Kerry is an AI trainer, a speaker and copywriter helping businesses to augment their skills with artificial intelligence. Over the last 5 years, she has co-created the world's first AI gin, brought the award-winning Cheltenham Science Festival AI Curator to life, and delivered AI training to hundreds of people across the globe. She's also won 2 DMA awards for best use of AI and is an AI trainer for CIM and the Google Digital Garage program. So Kerry's presentation itself will last approximately 45 minutes with a 15-minute Q&A at the end. You'll be able to send questions to Kerry at any time during the webinar via the questions icon that you can see on your user display, and we'll address as many questions as we can during the Q&A session at the end. You can also download a copy of the presentation deck, which you'll find in the materials section of your user display. And the webinar is also being recorded and will be available on our content hub within the next few working days. And you can also revisit any of our previous member exclusive webinars here too. And if you experience any technical issues during the broadcast, such as loss of sound or the connection drops, then we recommend that you log out of the session for a minute or two and then log back in, and everything should be okay. So I'm now delighted to hand over to today's presenter, Kerry Harrison. Kerry, if you would like to turn your webcam on, I'll pass things over to you to start when you are ready.
Hello. Excellent. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. It's really great to be here. So I thank you for the introduction, and I'm going to get started. So let me share my screen and make sure everyone can see everything. So here we go. Bear with me while I do that. Okey-doke. Here we go. Right, let's get started. So welcome to the session. It's really nice to be here, and we're talking about AI and copywriting today. So I've already been introduced, which is great. I'm just going to give you a few little highlights from the last 6 years for me. So I've been a copywriter for over 23 years now, which makes me feel really old saying that. But I started out as a graduate trainee back in 2001. And then worked my way up through agencies until I became a creative director. So headed up an agency creative department before heading out on my own as a freelance copywriter. But also I set up a creative practice, an AI creative practice back in 2018, which back then everyone was saying to me, what is this AI stuff that you're doing? It's really weird. And then, back end of 2022, when ChatGPT arrived, suddenly everyone was like, oh, we kind of get it now, what you're up to. So a lot has changed in 6 years for me, but it's been a real amazing journey. So I've been in the world of AI for 6 years. So back when I was talking in 2018, 2019, I remember people saying to me about copywriting, they were like, are you scared of your job as a copywriter? And I remember saying back then, no, I'm not even slightly worried. The AI copywriting is just really awful. And then in 2022, when ChatGPT arrived, I was like, okay, so this is going to be a really useful tool for me. So I've created an AI curator for the Cheltenham Science Festival. This is a picture of me about 5 a.m. We took our AI curator actually onto BBC Radio and gave it an AI generated voice, which back then in 2019 was really otherworldly and very, very weird. And now actually there's AI voices which are almost indistinguishable from human ones. Also created the world's first AI gin. I've got one on my desk here. I've still got one. I bought one to drink and one to keep. And I don't know if I'll ever break that open or not. I've won 2 demos, best use of AI, and I speak nationally and internationally. So I'm an AI trainer at the CIM on the AI copywriting masterclass and the AI enabled content production course. And I'm also go out with Google Digital Garage as well into communities across the country to help people to upskill. So that's a little bit about me. So it'd be great to hear a little bit from you first. So before I go into it, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, and then we're going to go into the copywriting side of things. But it'd be great. So if we could launch the poll here. So I'd really like to get a feel for how you are using AI at the moment. And you just be totally honest. It doesn't matter if you've never used it at all or if you're using it every day. It's just quite nice to get a feel for it. So as I move through the presentation, I kind of know what kind of level you're at and how you're using it. So if you could answer the poll, that would be brilliant. And then we'll come back and have a look at the results in a moment. So I'll give you a minute or so to do that, see what's coming through. Oh, I like seeing it all moving. It's quite nice to. Okay. So we've got a good mix of people there. So look, a lot of you seem to be using it quite regularly. So that's good to know. And also just some people just dabbling. Yeah, a good mix there. So if we can, I'll move on now so that I can get started. But thanks for doing that. It is really. I think it's also just really nice to know from everyone, for everyone else as well, to see that there are still people that haven't tried it. There's a lot of people just dabbling and playing, which is very, very normal. A lot of the courses I do, people are just starting out. It's also really interesting to see there's 30%, nearly 30% of you using it on a daily basis. So yeah, really nice spread there. So how are we doing? That's ended. Okay, brilliant. So let's move on to the rest of the presentation. So here we go. So I thought it'd be good to start with just a quick overview of AI in general, just because I think it's one of those words that is bandied around a lot. We see it's literally everywhere now. Every newspaper you pick up, every business article, there's so much about AI. I don't know if that's because I'm in my little bubble, but there's a lot around AI. So just as a top line, AI, or artificial intelligence, describes digital systems that reason, learn, and perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, or systems with data that exceed what humans can analyze. So that's a very top line view of AI. And we're going to be looking at generative AI today. So pretty much everything I'll be talking about is generative AI. So AI as a term is the overarching umbrella term, and then we'll be talking about generative AI today. So in terms of the tools we'll be talking about, we're looking at large language models. So large language models are tools like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, which I'm sure you all know. But I think what's quite interesting is to just know how these models work and how they write compared to the way that we write. Because I think sometimes it's good to know that we write really, really differently to an AI tool. So in terms of large language models or generative AI, this is the way that works. So all of these models are trained on huge amounts of data. So when you think about billions and billions of words, essentially, so the model has been trained essentially on the internet, and it has ingested articles and news reports and pretty much anything you can think of. So it's got a huge amount of language. Then what the AI does, it finds patterns within that data. So it will look for patterns, it will look for how things work together. So in terms of language, it will look at things like sentence structures and syntax and punctuation and spelling, and it will form all of these, it will recognize all of these patterns. Then when you ask it to do something, it will evaluate all of the patterns that it's created from all the data it's ingested, and it will make predictions. So essentially what large language models do is to make a prediction around what's the next likely word. From everything I know, what's the word that's most likely to come next. So essentially that's a very top line view of how it works, but it's a massive prediction model when you think about it. And I quite like to think of it like this, because the way that we write as humans, as copywriters, is so different to that. We don't write by predicting. Of course, we've ingested ourselves with patterns, and we know about grammar and syntax and all of those things, but we don't make predictions. We write with real world experience, with a deep understanding of our clients, of our brands, of our organizations, all of these things. So the way that we write is very, very different. It's a big, massive prediction model. So in terms of the tools, now there are so many AI tools that are available for writing, and you could literally be trying them all day, every day, and still not cover them all. In fact, someone messaged me early this morning and said, "Have you seen this tool?" And I said, "Oh, I haven't actually seen that one. I've not tried it." And I think what happened about 18 months or so ago, I decided that rather than trying out every single tool that comes along, what I'd be best to do is maybe just concentrate on 3 or 4, or even 2, and just really get to know it well. So I think what makes the big difference is, rather, and I'm such a magpie, I love going around and trying out lots of different tools, but I think where I've really developed is in choosing 1 or 2 and really learning to master them. And I think when you do that, you can keep up with the developments of those tools, because bearing in mind, ChatGPT, it changes all the time. Just before Christmas, they literally launched 12 new things over the 12 days of Christmas promotion that they did. And so if you're looking at 20 different models and trying out everything, it can be really overwhelming, and you also just spread so thinly, you never really get great at anything. So for me, I think it's good to stick with the key players. On top of these, I have to admit, we've also got DeepSeek, we've also got Grok, which is Elon Musk's tool. So there are other big players. It's not like these are the only ones, but for me, these are the sort of 4 that I use all the time. So ChatGPT, great all rounder. There's lots of additional things in there, like the GPT store. There's also a chance for you to interact with it with voice, and their advanced voice mode is really great. If you haven't tried that, it's very super fluid. Claude, which is probably my go-to for writing, actually, for copywriting. I think it's got a really nice tone of voice, like it's a bit more friendly, a little bit more human. So for B2C copy, I think Claude is a real go-to. I also like the fact that it's been trained to align with a constitutional AI document, so it is aligned with things like opposition to inhumane treatment, things like privacy. So if you go onto their website, you'll see there's quite a lot of references to safety. So I quite like the fact that they've sort of aligned it with those kind of principles. We've also got Copilot, which is Microsoft. I think what's great about that is it's integrated into Microsoft Suite. So if you're in Word, you've got a model working right with you where you're doing your writing, which I think is super handy. And the same with Gemini. So Gemini, which is Google's tool, you can lots of things again that you can do, and they're all slightly different. Unfortunately, there's not just one tool that does it all. Like I'll sometimes go to Gemini because it's got quite nice abilities to fact check. I quite like it for more like research based writing, or maybe writing that's quite fact based. Whereas Claude, I'll go to for my B2C copy. ChatGPT, I tend to go for more strategic support and maybe structuring. So they've all got their pros and cons, but these are the kind of big players, I would say. So things that are unique about ChatGPT, as I mentioned, they've got advanced voice mode. So if you're doing anything like brainstorming, or you want to just chat rather than type, then their advanced voice mode is brilliant. It's almost like having a conversation. It's really super fluid. You can interrupt it and it will stop. It's literally like having a chat with a human. And then we've also got GPTs. So I'm just going to take you really quickly into ChatGPT just to give you a bit of a whistle stop tour of GPTs if you haven't already used them. So GPTs piggyback the main ChatGPT model, but they do something really, really specific. So if you think about them like apps, a while ago there's a whole kind of like, oh, there's an app for that, and now it's a bit like there's a GPT for that. So if you haven't gone into GPTs, if you go into GPTs, you'll find them here. So these are all the ones that I built some of my own, and I've got them open, so you might not have a whole list there, but it's this button here. And if you go into GPTs, you'll see there's pretty much everything you can think of. So there's GPTs for writing, productivity. This is one of my favorite ones. It's called Planty. So this is for so I've got a very sorry looking houseplant in my just by my front door, actually. And if you go into Planty has been trained on everything you could ever want to know about houseplants. So that is, again, just quite a useful thing to know. You go into any of these apps, you start the chat, and it's been this model then, although it's piggybacking the main model, you can then have a good chat with that and find out the information you need. So there are the ones that are specific to copywriting as well. So there's a whole load of them. So if I just go back in to write some, go into the writing ones, you'll see here. So write for me, AI humanizer, copywriter GPT. So those them you might find useful as well. So those are something that you get in ChatGPT that you don't necessarily get anywhere else. And then we've also got Claude. So Claude is, as I said, is my real go-to for writing. And one of the things that's unique about Claude, which I think is brilliant, is this idea that you can choose your style. So with ChatGPT, you would have to specify your tone of voice or your style that you want it to write in. With Claude, you can do that directly from the prompt box here. So if you click on choose style, you can drop down and you can decide how you want it to answer. So normal is its default response. If you just want it to reply in a very concise way, so if you want to summarize something, for example, then concise would be a really good option for you there. It's just going to give you a much shorter answer. Explanatory is great if you're learning something, or if you want the model to explain a concept to you, then that's a nice one to do. And then there's formal, which is more sort of super polished and a bit more business-like, I'd say. But you can also create your own style in here as well. So I've got Kerry's TOV there, tone of voice. So if you're going to create and edit styles, create a custom style, you can then upload a range of writing. Well, you can put lots of writing examples into a document and upload that, and then it will process all of that and turn it into a style that you can then just activate from the main window. So when I go in here now, if I want it to reply like this, I've trained this on my blog writing style, so it's and my newsletter style, so it's more like conversational, so I'm not necessarily going to use it for everything, but I can click on there and it'll give me that kind of tone of voice. So I think that's a really useful thing to know. So those are, I could talk about the tools all day, and I don't want to just talk about the tools. So let me just move on, because I want to give you some tools and tips as well. So choose style, which I've just shown about, is the thing that I really like in Claude. On top of the models I've just talked about, we've also got AI search tools as well. So we've got Perplexity and ChatGPT. You can search within ChatGPT, so you can use it like a search engine. And then there's also Perplexity, which if you're doing any kind of research is really, really useful. So that's my kind of go-to in terms of AI search. So it understands what you're asking, and then it searches the web in real time, and then it'll come back and give you a conversational response. So the image there on the left, you can see when you ask it a question, rather than surfacing lots of different results like Google, it will just give you one response, and then you can then click on the citations to see where it's cross-referenced the sources. So it's a nice way of not only getting answers to questions, but if you're researching, it will return loads and loads of different sources that you can then go off and explore. So that's quite useful to sometimes if I'm exploring a particular topic for a blog, for example, I'll use Perplexity, I'll go in and it'll surface loads of different articles, it'll give me videos, lots of different things, and then I can go in and have a look at those in more detail. So that's nice. Also, you'll see there at the bottom on that image, you can ask follow-up questions. So I really like this as well, in that it isn't just a one-off search and the result. You can then type in and ask further questions about the search. So you can really go in quite deep with that. So unlike Google, where you'd have to then go in and do another search, with here you can just carry on the conversation. So those are one of the real benefits, I think, of having this search within chatbots like Perplexity and ChatGPT. So I think one of the key things to talk about, one of the things people always ask in literally every workshop I ever run, is how to create an effective prompt. And there's loads of different prompting techniques. I thought I'd take you through one today, which I think if you're starting out, or even if you're not, it's just quite a useful thing to bear in mind. So really, the quality of your output very much depends on the quality of your prompt. And I'm sure those, especially people that are using it daily, will know that if you give it a very basic, very generic prompt, what you get out the other end reflects that. You'll get something that's also quite generic back. So being really specific in your prompts is super important. So this is a prompt guide that I found. This has come out of Microsoft, and I thought this would be useful to share with you. I just thought, when I saw it, I just thought, actually, this is really good, because it's all the things that we need to include in our prompts, and it's really easy to remember. So it's called GCSE prompting, and I just think it's a great all-round guide. So the first thing that I would say you need for any prompt is to think about the goal. So what is it that you want the model to generate? And really, we should be turning up always with a goal. It's very easy, I think, to turn up to ChatGPT and just kind of go, oh, can you do this and do that? But we kind of need to know why we're there, why we're using AI. Do we even need to use AI right now? But so go in with a goal, not only just for yourself, but also you need to tell the model what your goal is. So you need to clearly state what you want the model to generate. So is it a blog? Is it a product description? Is it a social media post? Is it a summary? Or do you want it to analyze something? So be very clear on the goal. and tell the model what that is. The second thing is to give it context. So I think context can sometimes sound quite superfluous, but actually the context makes a massive difference to what you get out the other end too. Because you've given it some background information, what you get is something that's much more customized. If you don't give it that background, you're kind of moving more into that mediocre sort of vanilla territory. So I often say to think about these AI tools, so, ChatGPT or Claude, to think of it like an intern, a kind of supercharged intern. And if you were asking an intern to write a blog for you, you probably wouldn't just say, oh, can you go write me a blog on workplace well-being? You'd give them a bit of information. You'd probably say, where is it going? Who's it going to? Who's the target audience? How long do you want it to be? And you probably would also say, I'd really like to see these things go in the blogs. If you could include those in, that would be great. And this is the kind of information we need to give to the model too. So provide the context, set the scene for it. You can tell it a little about the nature of the project, the target audience, maybe some any kind of strategic thoughts that you've got, any ideas you've got. Give the model all of that in your prompt so that what you get out is then much more in line with what you're looking for. The next one is sources. So I tend to call these examples I've also got my own prompting methodology, which is a bit more detailed, which I go into in my course. But sources is to give the model examples of what you would like to see. So this could be anything from, if you're writing product descriptions, give the model a couple of examples of what a great product description looks like. If you're writing a blog, give it 2 or 3 examples of blogs you've written before and ask it to follow that tone and style. So giving it sources really makes a massive difference, as you would expect, because you've kind of shown the model and said, this is what I'm looking for. This is what great looks like. It means then that, again, just another way of getting something out at the other end, which is just much more useful for you. So give it examples. It might be style examples. It might be structure, the way that you want something to be structured. So things like case studies, it's brilliant for. So my case studies tend to follow quite a typical pattern, but of what's the problem, what's the solution, and what are the results. So if I'm doing a new case study, then I would show it examples of 2 case studies I've done before, and then I give it all the information about my new case study and ask it to follow the style of and the tone of the examples. And then what I get back is normally I did this very recently and thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. It's even done the headlines and the subheadlines, and it's followed that very rigid structure. So give it some examples. And the last one is to set your expectations. So this is just to outline how you want your response to be delivered. So if you're doing a summary, if you want it to summarize something for you, you probably don't want it to reply in a very chatty paragraph kind of way. You probably just want it in bullet points. So tell the model, please reply in bullet points. You might want a table if you're summarizing something and you want to see what various things look like in something that's very easy to scan. You might want a short paragraph, a long paragraph. You might want 100 words. You might want 700 words. So again, be very specific on those expectations. Otherwise, what you're going to get back is maybe not exactly what you want, or it might just not be very valuable or efficient for you. You can also tell it here about tone of voice, so prompting with tone. So there's so many ways you can impact tone of voice, but for a starting point, just give it some keywords. So, friendly and conversational, for example. So an example of what that would look like. So this is a prompt for a product description. So what's my goal? I want it to write a product description for me. So, and this is my background. So I've given it all the context. So it's a new low impact reusable water bottle. It's for environmentally conscious young people aged between 18 and 25. I want it to include a range of things. So these are my sort of key USPs for my water bottle. And I want it to be around 100 to 150 words. I've said the brand has a fun, casual and quirky voice, and I've given it some past product descriptions as a guide as well. So please use these past product descriptions. And I'll probably give it 2 or 3 examples, and you can either copy and paste those into your prompt, or you can, if you use the little paperclip, you can press that and upload those into there as well, so you can reference it. But that's it doesn't have to be massively long. It just needs to be really as specific as you can be. So a few other ways you can use AI in terms of copywriting is for sparking ideas. And I use it for this a lot to just help me to get started. And it isn't a replacement for you using your amazing brains and your incredible creativity. And I really advocate for that, in that I don't ever want us to rely too heavily on AI, because I feel like we should just keep nurturing our creativity and really celebrating it, because AI is never going to think completely like laterally. It hasn't got a real world understanding, so we can bring all that into it to the table. But it is really good for getting started. It's very good for getting over the blank page. If you've ever been in those points where you're like, oh, I just don't know where to start, or I just don't know what, I've completely got no ideas, I'm really tired today and I can't think of anything, then AI will get you started. And you can use it for everything from work related things to, I've given it, for example, if I really need a recipe very quickly and my kids are really hungry, and I literally tell it what I've got in my fridge and ask it for a recipe. So you can use it for ideas for life and work. And I think as soon as you start using it for in lots of different ways, you'll be like, oh, okay, so I've done it for that, so I'll probably do it for that as well. And yeah, it really is a great brainstorming tool. So this is just an example of how you might want to use it in terms of copywriting or content. So I've said I'm brainstorming some content ideas for my fortnightly newsletter on AI and content creation. I'm looking for 20 possible ideas which are engaging, current, and highly practical. My target audience are copywriters, content creators, founders, and solopreneurs. So that's my general target audience for my newsletter, and they want to save time and boost efficiency. Please reply in bullet points with a short rationale for each. So that idea of giving it a rationale is also quite useful, asking it to actually explain its answer and why it's done that. And you'll see then within a matter of seconds, I've now got 20 newsletter content ideas. So there might be one or two in there that I like. There might be some that just make me go, oh, that's really interesting, I hadn't thought about that, and take my thinking off in new directions. So either way, within a matter of seconds, I've got 20 ideas where I had nothing before, and it will just mean that I can get started. So it's really good for that kind of side of things. If you prefer brainstorming with voice, which I really do prefer personally, because I think because in my advertising days where we would sit around tables and brainstorm back and forth with each other, I've always found it's just naturally it's something that we tend to do with our voices. So the ChatGPT app is a really good one. I'd really recommend it. So you can download that, and then you can just go back and forth. So I often go, I feel like anyone that knew that I was talking to ChatGPT would probably think I was quite bonkers, but on a dog walk, if I'm trying to bounce ideas around or think about something, I'll just use ChatGPT and just go back and forth with ideas, and use a similar prompt to what I've done here. So tell it what I'm doing. I'm brainstorming content ideas. Can you suggest 20 ideas? And it just means that I've got it in voice. If you do it with your voice, you can then go back into your ChatGPT when you get back from your dog walk, and you'll see the transcript in there, so you haven't lost it. So if it comes up with some ideas and you're like, oh, that's really good, you don't have to worry about writing it down or trying to remember it. It will all be there when you get back as well. So I think that's quite useful to know. So another tool that I think, another way AI is really useful for copywriting is for research. And this is one of the ways that I use it the most, I think, is I just think it's very useful for summarizing, for helping us to learn new things, for making complex tasks really simple, for helping us to gather an overview of maybe multiple sources. It's really, really handy for this. So a couple of ways that I use it. So very, very simple, summarizing information. So AI is very good at doing this, and anyone who's used any of the AI, like you can take your note takers into meetings and stuff, will know that it's very, very good for summarizing. So it can be everything from an article to a PDF document to an ebook. Anything that you need summarizing, AI will do a really good job for that. So you can see here again, I said please reply in bullet points. I just want a quick summary of what the article is, and there it is. I always say, so I also lecture at universities as well, and I always say, especially to students, this is not an excuse for you to never read ever again, because sometimes it's really tempting, I think, especially if I see very, very long form copy and I'm like, oh, maybe I could just get AI to summarize it for me. But I think it's still really important that we still read. For me, I like reading full documents because it helps me to formulate my own viewpoints. But where I think this is very useful without impacting us reading is if I've got 5 articles to read and I haven't got time to read all 5, I would get AI to summarize all 5 of those articles. Then I would go through, look at the summaries and say, okay, now I've seen the summaries of those, I'm going to invest my time and read this one and this one from top to bottom. So it's a really good way of helping you to invest your time wisely. I think before the world of AI and before this kind of summarization capabilities, I wowould often read articles or PDFs or very, very long research papers and then think, oh gosh, I've just read that entire article or research paper and it was no use for my project at all. So I don't have to go down that route anymore. I can get AI to summarize it for me. I can see what's useful, and then I'll go, okay, I'm going to sit down and do a couple of hours reading this massive research paper because I believe it's going to be really worth my while. So summarizing, super handy. If you haven't seen Notebook LM, I'd really recommend this too. So I'm just going to take you into a demo because I think it's easier for me to show you how this works in real life. So let me go into, hopefully it's loaded my thing. So in Notebook LM, it's a Google tool and it's free, although I am on the Plus just because I pay for Google. So, and what it allows you to do is essentially put loads and loads of sources into one folder. So it's like a notebook. So it's essentially like a folder, and you can just bring any sources you want into it and then chat with those sources. So I'm going to show, okay, so I did some audience research recently around copywriting. And I just wanted to get a general feel for how people in the world of copywriting, what they were feeling, thinking, exploring in the world of AI. So I went to, this is where I've used two tools side by side. So Perplexity, which helped me find a load of sources. And then I brought the sources that I'd found that I sort of handpicked from that exploration and brought them all into this notebook. And you'll see here I've got lots of different articles and videos that have been summarized. So when you bring in sources to your notebook, it will automatically summarize them. So this is a very short summary of all of these sources together. So it will do that. If I don't want it to summarize all of them, I can untick certain ones and just get a summary of whichever ones I want it to summarize. You can also, there's a range of other things you can do in it, but one of the things that I quite like is that you can then interact with all of those sources. So if, for example, I wanted to know what are the 5 key themes from these sources, then what it will do is it will come back and I can then get, so I think this is pretty useful because now I've got all of these sources and I just want to see what the main threads are. Then this is really useful. So very, very quickly, I've been able to see, okay, so here are the 5 main. So AI adoption is increasing, organizational readiness is a growing concern, generative AI shows promise in specific areas. So I can see from all of those 23, this is the kind of top line view of all of it. But I can also go into more details. You'll see here at the bottom, there's some questions it's asked me that's suggested for me. So how does AI impact the Thai advertising industry? That's quite random. What strategies can help copywriters adapt to these new technologies? But you can obviously just type. So whatever you bring in, you can essentially chat with in here. You can't use it to write, so it's not going to write for you. This is mainly for research, for discovering more tools that are helpful. What it can do though is give you a briefing document. It can turn something into FAQs. So if you've got a big document, you want to create FAQs from it, you can click this button and it will create some FAQs for you. If you've got something that would require a timeline, so what it will do if you do a timeline is it will give you everything in chronological order. And then a study guide, which is a bit like those study guides you have when you're at university. If you want to try and understand a topic or a subject, it will give you a study guide and ask you questions around the topic. I'm going to just go back into just something with one simple source. So obviously I've got that one there where I've got lots of different sources, but you can also just put in one. So if you just want to talk with one PDF or one research paper, then it's pretty useful for that too. So I've just put in a blog on copywriting from my website just to show you how this works. And you'll see here that there's also, let me just load this, alongside giving you a chance to chat with the sources, you'll also see that you can do what's called an audio overview. So when this came out, I thought, oh, that's quite a good idea. I'm guessing it's going to give me an audio version of this summary in front of me here. But no, it gives you a little mini podcast of whatever you uploaded into your notebook. So if you learn well through listening, this is quite useful. I did a workshop recently with a woman who was saying that her son was using it for revision. So he put his revision notes in, and then he was creating these little mini podcasts so that he could help him to revise quicker, which I thought was quite a cool idea. I'm not sure I'd definitely recommend that, but that's interesting to see what the use cases are. So I'll just play this to you so you can hear it. And this is what it sounds like. So this is two AI people talking about my blog. And it goes on. So that's the audio overviews in there. But yeah, this is such a big tool. There's lots of things you can do in there. But I think for research, it's a really useful one to bear in mind. So what else have I got to share with you? Let me just go back into present. So another thing you can do, which I find quite useful, is to get an audience viewpoint on. It's another way that I do research and also help me to come up with content ideas. So you can ask the model to research a particular target audience, and I've got a relatively light prompt here, but you can go much deeper than this, where you would say, can you give me the audience's viewpoint on something? So I've asked here, so please research my target customer, and I want you to give me a table with my audience's top 10 dreams, desires, fears, and frustrations. So I kind of want to know what they're thinking and feeling about AI and what their issues might be. So you can be as detailed as you can. If you've got a full persona, then obviously put that in and you'll get a better output. But this is what I get. And again, this is not a replacement for obviously for you going out and speaking to your customers firsthand. But if you need to do some very quick desk research, if you want to get some content ideas, this is a really useful tool because it means within a matter of seconds, there's only 8 that fitted on the screen, but I've now got 10 dreams, desires, fears, and frustrations for my particular target audience. So if, for example, I could have a look through this now and I could say, okay, so the frustrations of a copywriter might be, let's see, it's a steep learning curve associated with mastering your AI tools. So what I could do after seeing that is maybe do some very short how-to videos or some short how-to guides so that we can sort of combat this steep learning curve that they may be experiencing. In the same way that now I've seen what their dreams are and what their desires are. So their desires are to enhance writing efficiency and productivity. I could go into more detail around those kind of topics around helping them to be more effective or efficient. So these kind of things, it's the speed of them that really makes a massive difference. The fact that I have these 10 fears, frustrations, dreams, and desires within a matter of seconds, and it can really help me to elaborate on my own thinking, or again to spark ideas to take me off in new directions. So in terms of writing copy, and I know there's quite a lot of you that are already using it daily, but I feel like there's a difference between short form and long form. So for me with short form, I feel like you can get away with a slightly lighter prompt. So if it's headlines, you can ask it these simple prompts here. So please justify compelling headlines for an article on the ethical considerations for using AI. And then I've given it just my target audience on that one. But you can use the GCSE prompting here as well and go into detail, give it some example headlines you've done before, maybe put in your best performing blog headlines if you want to get it to generate more headlines for you. Subject lines. It's quite useful, I think, doing so. I tend to leave my subject lines till last, and then I'll put in my email and say, please write 5 intriguing subject lines for this email, and then I'll give it my email so it knows what I'm creating and what it's all about, and then it will be able to create subject lines for me specifically to that email rather than start trying to explain it all. Sometimes it's best just to say, this is the email, this is what I need. And then call to action. So again, with call to action, sometimes it's easy to get into the kind of just those ones that find out more or book now. So I quite like just asking it for call to actions just to shake things up a little bit, because I often find myself doing those very simple ones, and sometimes it's just quite nice to have something a bit more quirky. So you see there, I've just asked it for CTAs to say I've only got 3 spaces left on my AI writing workshop, and it will then create CTAs in line with that. In terms of long form writing, I think that the prompting side of things becomes super, super important. And I think that so I played around a lot in the last sort of 2.5 years on how to write great copy with AI. And for me, until probably about 18 months ago, I always thought, okay, I'm going to generate my first draft with AI and then I'm going to apply my craft on top. And then what I realized about 18 months or so ago, maybe a year ago, was that what we do before we even press generate is equally, if not more important than what we do afterwards. And so for me, the way that we get the best writing is a 3-part process. And this part process is human, then AI, and then human. And it just felt like felt like a sandwich to me. So I called it the AI sandwich, which I know is not the most sophisticated name for a methodology, but it works really well and people seem to like the AI sandwich. So I created this last year, so it was January last year I wrote my blog on it, and it still feels super current today. So I did check again this January. It's like, is this still relevant? It's like, yes, it really is, if not more relevant than it has been before, especially if you want to be creating content and creating writing that really stands out. So just quickly to take you through it. So step 1 for me is basically human intelligence. So before we even touch the tools, we need to do some thinking. This is where it's that talking to an intern. It's really thinking about what information do I need to give to the model. It's coming to the model with an objective. So knowing, why am I here at this model? What am I just about to type in? Do I really need to use AI? Or actually, am I better off sitting down with a notepad and paper and a pen? Sometimes I still do that, especially if I'm doing highly conceptual work. I still don't think AI is there yet with the conceptual side of things. So I'll often just sit down with a pad of paper and go, I'm not even going to touch AI for this one. So really working out when it's going to help you and when it's not. And I think once you do that, you don't end up going down rabbit holes and get really frustrated. So turning up with the tool, knowing what you want. If you've got any strategy, any creative thinking, any research, all of that can go into a prompt. So you've got this really, really detailed prompt, which will give you this much more detailed and much more valuable output. So you need you, first of all. Then when you've done all that work, you then use the AI. And that's brilliant. It's going to speed up the process, going to give you a great first draft if you've taken a little bit of time on the prompting. And then you add yourself again at the end. And this, again, is super important. As I was saying, we need to add the craft. AI doesn't know our audience, doesn't know our brand, doesn't know our people like we do, because we live in the real world. And yes, it can fake that stuff. It can make predictions, but it doesn't live like we do. So we have to bring that in afterwards. So, and we also know loads about copywriting because we're copywriters, right? So adding that craft afterwards is really important too. But we also need to be fact checking. So one of the problems with AI tools is the fact that it may hallucinate. It doesn't hallucinate all the time. So hallucination is a term that computer scientists have used where the model makes something up. Like, I say make something up, sounds very human. Like, create something that's not factually correct, maybe because it doesn't have the real world understanding, or maybe because it doesn't have enough information in its data set. So it might make something up. So it's not going to do that all the time, but it's just something we need to bear in mind. So fact checking everything is really important. So anytime it generates anything that is a fact, you just need to just go and double check that just to be sure, because it'll sound very authoritative, but it might not necessarily be true. We also need to sense check. So I think one of the things, especially when I started using tools like ChatGPT at the very beginning, there's this real wow factor involved with AI. And you go in and go, oh my gosh, it's written an entire blog for me in like 60 seconds. That's crazy. And when you first look at it, you go, that's amazing. And then what you'll notice is, as writers, that you'll go into and go, actually, if I really properly analyze it, there are things that I would really want to change, or maybe it's not totally grasped everything that you wanted. So going in and sense checking it as well. And I think one of the questions is this any good, is the first one, but also going back to the step 1, has this actually met my objective? Because I think sometimes we just like the fact that it's done really, really quickly, but it might not necessarily be what you'd have done. If you'd have written it from scratch, would it look anything like this? So those questions that we need to ask ourselves at the end as well. So adding your craft, using our amazing human intelligence both before and after the tools, I think means that what we get is something much more customized. But not only that, but just something that's uniquely yours. Because the problem is that as more people start using these tools, a lot of the work that's going to come out could potentially sound very vanilla, very the same, and we don't want our work to sound the same. I definitely work even harder now to make sure I sound nothing like ChatGPT. So we have to do that. And I also think people are getting really savvy now. So I was speaking to someone recently who was saying, she's a recruitment consultant. She said, I can just tell when someone's written their covering letter with AI. People are getting pretty savvy. So adding these human elements before and after will mean that we can stay authentic and stand out. So in terms of how that might look in real life, so I created an article for Enterprise Nation, and what I did was I wrote a detailed prompt. So everything that I've showed you already, and you'll have this prompt when you go and have a look at it, but just giving it some background information, telling it what I'd like to include. I've been very specific about the word count. I've also said to it, do you need any further information to generate the structure? Another useful prompting little thing you can just put on the end of your prompts, do you need any further information? I think that again is useful, because then it might come back and say, actually, can you tell me more about this? Or it might just ask you something that you'd not considered or not put in your prompt yet. Another one you could add there is, are you ready? Which someone mentioned the other day, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. Which is a bit like that one, but just, are you ready? And then it will either just generate straight away, or might ask you some more questions. So just a very simple thing you can put on the end of your prompt. Then what it gave me was a blog structure. So I think structuring often took me a really long time, especially if I had done a huge amount of research. So the fact that AI can help me to create a structure is brilliant. It's even given me the outline of how many words I want to do. So I've had this nice structure. And then because I love writing and I still like to write by hand, I used the structure, and then I filled in all the information in between. So that was the result. So that's how I worked it there. So I did my thinking, created a strong prompt, used AI to generate the structure, and then used me to write the writing. So it's also super useful for helping you to improve writing. So whether that's AI generated or your own writing, and there's loads and loads it can do here. And I can go into, I've got a whole module on this in the course. So asking for improvement. So it might be something very generic. So 5 ways I can improve this blog, or maybe it's just you want to improve a specific area. So you can be really specific. So can you include the clarity of this blog, or the fluency, or the readability? And obviously you can ask it to make it shorter or longer, or ask it for grammar support. It's just very good, I think, for helping you to get unstuck. So asking it for improvements. So yeah, lots more I can say on that. There's also a tool called Canvas, which is in ChatGPT, which you can go into. I know I'm running out of time, but I just want to show you very quickly, because this is quite useful. So I've already done this earlier. Let me just see if I've got it. So what I did with this, and you'll see the prompt. So with Canvas, what it will do is it will open, if there's a point where ChatGPT thinks that you will need to edit your work. So if you're doing long form copy, and it will predict that you're going to edit it, because it wants you to stay inside the platform, it will often open in Canvas. So when it opens in Canvas, it opens in a side window. But what you can also do is put your own work into it and ask it to open in Canvas. So you can see here, I've just said, please open in Canvas. And then I've just dropped in my blog from my website, just to show you how it works. And then what it'll do is it'll open it in Canvas. So Canvas looks like this. So your prompts on the left hand side, and then this is now my blog, is in Canvas. And then what you can do in Canvas, if you just click here, you can then ask ChatGPT to help you with the editing process. So this is not generated, this is my copy that I wrote by hand. And I can ask it to suggest edits for me. I can adjust the length. I can adjust the reading levels. This is quite useful. So I can just go up and down. So I can go to kindergarten level right up to graduate school. So I can decide what kind of reading level I want it to be at. I can give it a final polish. So if you're pretty happy with what you've created and you just want a bit of a polish, you can do that. And you can also suggest edits. So what it will do is it will scan the copy for you, and then it will give you some suggested edits. So you can see here it's going through, and it's saying to me, consider adding a brief introduction to immediate engage readers. You could add a short transition sentence here, etc., etc. So it will go through and give you some handy tips. And then if you like them, you can apply it. If you don't like it, you can just click no. I don't want to do that right now. Well, normally you can. I don't know why it's done that. Anyway, so super useful tool that you can try if you want to do editing within ChatGPT. Another thing you can do, while I'm in ChatGPT, is to create your own GPTs, which I showed you earlier. So let me just come out of this. So I've created a range of GPTs, for example, where I've trained it on me. So I've got one called Kerry's Copy Companion, where I've trained it on my own copywriting. If I just go into the back end a minute, you should be, I think this is the one. Oh no, okay. So I've trained it on, I don't want to go into so much detail, I'm not going to. So I could you can train, so you can give it lots of examples of work that you've done. You can, hang on a second, go back in. You can train it on any particular knowledge. So you could tell it what your beliefs are, what your target audience is. You can give it lots of examples of your own work. And then every time I go into that GPT, then it sounds more like me. So it's a bit like the thing I showed you earlier with Claude, but only you can give it lots more information. So train your own GPTs. Again, on the course, I go into lots of detail on that, so you can build your own. So just winding up, I'm conscious that I would want to leave a little bit of time for questions. So just some key considerations. Obviously, AI is amazing, but there's considerations as well. And I think I've covered some of these already, but things to just bear in mind: we need to fact check everything. So AI hallucinations are real and well written, so that it's not like it sounds nonsensical or completely mad. Like, it might sound very valuable, so just double check that anything factual is, you just need to just go off and check somewhere else. Think about the data you're handing over. So just be careful. I always say, don't put anything private, confidential, or proprietary into the free models. So in the free models, you're not getting any kind of protection from that. It's going to be used for future training. And you're not going to be compliant with GDPR. So you just need to be careful what data that you're handing over. So just bear in mind, don't give it names and addresses or any kind of health information, things like that. So just be careful. So although I say things like, oh, give it really good examples of great reports, or give it examples of product descriptions, or give it great examples to steer it in the right direction, just be careful what you're putting in. If you're putting in reports but they've not been released yet, or you're doing press releases and they're still embargoed, just be careful what you put into the models. So you definitely use it for that where it makes sense. If you've got something out in the public domain, if it's your own work, then it's brilliant. But just bear in mind your data. You need to, if you're paid level, like if you're teams level, enterprise level, especially if you're a bigger business, then you get much more data security in those areas. I always say with data, just any AI tools, just check the T's and C's, because they all vary actually quite dramatically. So if you come across a tool, however amazing it seems, just have a quick scan over the T's and C's and make sure you know what they're doing with your data. Transparency. So I always say, have conversations with your clients. So I think any client that comes to me for copywriting, they're kind of going to know that I use AI. So we always have a conversation about it. Are you happy for me to use it? Some people don't want me to use AI, and I'm like, fine, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to write it, handcraft it from scratch. Perfect. Others they just want to know what I'm doing. So how are you going to use it? Some of them are just like, go for it. Just, let me know how long it takes. So having these conversations matters. So just being transparent. If you're using AI tools for things like image generation, so for example, on the left-hand side here, you'll see I've used AI images in my presentation. Everywhere I've done that, I've just marked that up, just because I think generally, as a rule, we just need to be transparent about how we're using it. And with things like the EU AI Act which has just come into force, things like transparency are a really important part of that. And although that we don't always have to adhere to that, if we're in the UK, for example, that those kind of things are still going to be important going forward. So just being transparent. And for the environment is another one. So just using AI efficiently. So although it seems quite magical, it is actually powered by massive data centers, which I often forget. So powered by huge data centers, which use a lot of electricity and a lot of water, actually. So water to cool the servers. So for me, this is why the AI, I go back to the AI sandwich, because if we take time to create great prompts, what we get out the other end is useful and valuable first time around. It means we don't have to keep going back in and doing things again and again and again and again. So just bearing that in mind, and it's not, so many people are using AI. It's really a lot of the responsibility comes down to the big models who are making these tools. But as individuals, we can always do our little bit. So just thinking about when you need to use it, and also just prompting it well, so what you get out is valuable. And then upskilling yourself and your team. So obviously you're here today, which is great, but I think it's very useful that everyone learns how to use AI wisely and well. So that's not just people in the C-suite or managers, it's everyone. Everyone is using the tools. And I think if people aren't using them, or it's not a conversation in an agency or in a business, often people are using it quietly, secretly, on the side. And actually that can be quite dangerous if people are not using it wisely, get into a bit of a pickle. So just generally, be really open, decide how you're going to work with it as a team, and upskill yourself. And then if we're all using it wisely and well, then you can really, really get the most out of it without worrying about getting in a pickle. So I think that's a really important part. So just a video to finish, then I'll open for for FAQs. But this is Project Astra. It's a Google project, and just to show you where things are going. So at the moment we tend to be on our laptops or maybe on the voice mode, but this is where AI, these kind of large language models are going, where it's much more aware of your surroundings. So let's have a look at this.
Okay, let's do some tests. Tell me when you see something that makes sound. I see a speaker, which makes sound. What is that part of the speaker called? That is the tweeter. It produces high-frequency sounds. Give me a creative alliteration about these. Creative crayons color cheerfully. They certainly craft colorful creations. What does that part of the code do? This code defines encryption and decryption functions. It seems to use AES-CVC encryption to encode and decode data based on a key and an initialization vector, IV. That's right. What neighborhood do you think I'm in? This appears to be the King's Cross area of London. It is known for its railway station and transportation connections. Do you remember where you saw my glasses? Yes, I do. Your glasses were on the desk near a red apple. What can I add here to make this system faster? Adding a cache between the server and database could improve speed. What does this remind you of? Schrodinger's cat. All right, give me a band name for this duo. Golden Stripes. Nice. Thanks, Gemini.
So that's kind of where we're going, and there's a lot more I can say on that too. So Q&A, that's me, I think.
Wow, thank you, Kerry. That was an absolutely brilliant presentation full of really fantastic insights and examples. So thank you ever so much for that. Yes, you are correct. We're now going to go into our Q&A session. We've had so many fantastic questions come in already. So thank you very much for submitting those. We don't have a lot of time left, but I will try and put as many questions through to Kerry so we can answer as many as possible in the time that we have left. So let's get to it. Let's get straight in. So the first thing, and this is something that I want to know as well, is how did you create an AI gin?
So we trained a neural network on like gin botanical combinations, and then it was able to generate its own combinations. So it learned what a great combination meant, generated its own combinations, and then we worked with a gin distiller in Bristol, which is my hometown, and human distillers then took the ones that they thought sounded super interesting and really, really lovely, and then crafted the gin. So that's how we did it.
Lovely. I think that was a burning question on everyone's lips. Okay, second question. So there's been quite a lot of discussion in the media about the ethics of using AI, covering a number of serious areas like copyright theft, excessive energy use, and high environmental impact. So can responsible marketers morally justify using AI versus established approaches? And is there a fear of missing out and the cult of the new forcing marketers down a sort of dark path?
Oh, it's a really great question. So I think hopefully I covered off some of the environmental issues that in the last bit there, where I think a lot of it comes down to prompting really well, so we're not generating things that we don't need or that are a bit rubbish, and then we have to go, oh, now I've seen it, I'm going to go do it again and again and again. I think it's about just using the tools wisely. So if you know how to use the tools and you can use them well and wisely, you'll also know where they don't work. So that's another thing. You know, for me, I know, for example, if I'm doing any kind of lateral thinking, if I'm doing top line conceptual advertising lines, it's not going to do that because it can't think laterally. As I mentioned earlier, it's a predictive model. So I know with that, there's no point me touching the AI tools. So I'll go off and I use a pen and paper and I use my brain. I think it's knowing when to use it, when it's going to help you, and when it's not. And that will help mean that you don't end up using it unnecessarily. In terms of FOMO, probably. I think the thing is that there are real benefits to using it. It saves time, it saves effort, it frees up more time for strategic and creative thinking. So that's really beneficial. Things like thought starters for ideas. It can help you get to a first draft faster, so it means that you can spend more time crafting. So the problem is there is probably a bit of FOMO, but then I think also when you use it, you realize that there are lots of benefits too. So I think it's difficult to answer the fact. Yes, so I think a lot of people are going like, oh my gosh, I really need to get in and go and use it because everyone else is using it. But then there's also real benefits too. So it's a bit of both really. And I think it's just a matter of using it carefully. So I think it's being aware of things that things I mentioned at the end, the fact we need to be fact checking, the fact that you need to check for things like plagiarism. So if you're just copying and pasting, which I hope no copywriter would do that, but if you ever want to just copy and paste, which I don't advocate for and never do, but you need to run things through like plagiarism checkers and things like that, which again is why the AI sandwich is really important, because it means that you're still adding you into it, so that you don't get into that kind of information, into that kind of situation. It's a big topic. I think it's just a matter of really knowing when to use it, and also just using it as wisely as you can, and being really informed actually at everyone across your organization, because it's sometimes you've got people that are super informed, but it's sometimes the people that are using it very quietly that you don't know about, that are perhaps putting in data they shouldn't be, or I think it's just being aware of what data you're putting in and checking the T's and C's as well, so you know what you're dealing with. Hopefully that helps.
Perfect, thank you. Yes. So I mean, there's been so many questions come in. Obviously, we're just not going to get round to answering all of them, unfortunately. But there were quite a few examples that you gave in your presentation about the different tools. Are the tools free? Is it worth subscribing if there is a sort of payment subscription to these tools? And also sort of I'm going to sort of kind of clump two questions together here. In addition to that, sort of what's your thoughts, and could you comment on the costs of the different AI tools, both in terms of, as I say, not only monetary, but also their carbon footprint?
Yeah, so okay, two things. So in terms of the money, when you upgrade to ChatGPT, you can build your own custom GPTs, you get access to advanced voice mode, you also get more credits, and if you're in the Teams element, you also get more data privacy. And then in terms of Claude, you then get access to projects, which are a bit like GPTs, where you can have a kind of area where you give it lots of information about a particular topic or subject or tone of voice, and then you can write with that. So you kind of pay for that. The higher you go in terms of price, the more privacy you get. It's a bit like, I suppose it's a bit like, I tend to think of it like social media, and it's, if the tool is free, then you're essentially the product, and what you pay for as you go at the level, once you get to enterprise levels, you pay for that security, additional security. So I think it depends who you are as a business, how often you're using it, how sensitive the data is. I mean, for me, I just don't put anything private, confidential, proprietary into the models. I'm really super careful with that. I'm not an enterprise, so I can't afford the enterprise level model. So I just have to be really careful. But if you are a business, you can go to that level. In terms of environmental footprint, I would suggest this, I feel like it's just like me say, but I wrote a massive article on it in my newsletter where I did loads and loads of research. So my newsletter is called Minds and Machines. It's on Substack. It's called Minds and Machines News. If you search for it, I wrote a whole article on it. It's nuanced. It's very difficult. Actually, it's also on my website. If you go onto my blog, there's a website. On my website, there's a blog there where I've gone into the detail. It's very, very difficult. Not everyone has been very clear about how much what the carbon footprints are. So the big models, for example, haven't really been clear about that, and we're still very much in unregulated territory. They're not really being forced to do that either. So I've got as close as I can to those statistics. So you'll find that on my blog or in my newsletter.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you. And I think we've got time for one final question, so I'll make this the final question. How do search engines treat AI generated content? So for example, would Google push AI content down on any search rankings?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So as far as I know, and this is changing all the time, no, but what they won't penalize it because it's AI generated, but they will penalize it if it's not very high quality. So their EEAT guidelines, which it's all around being authoritative, being expert, all of their trustworthy. So this is why, another reason why I say don't copy and paste, because if you're copying and pasting content from AI models, it's not necessarily going to be all of those things. It's not going to be trustworthy. It's not going to be expert. It's not going to be authoritative, because that's what you bring to it. So the content that you create and that you put onto websites still needs to be of high quality, and Google are very much still going to follow those guidelines. So it just needs to be good. You can have used AI in the process. It might be partly AI, might be partly you. But as long as it meets the guidelines that it's always needed to meet, then you're fine. It's not, in a way, it can't really penalize AI copy because they have their own models. Gemini is a massive part of Google, so they're not going to penalize that just because it's AI, but they will penalize it if it's not very good. if that makes sense.
Perfect, lovely. Thank you ever so much for that, Kerry. Really do appreciate it. One sort of final thing to point out is, unfortunately, the sound didn't play on the notebook LM discussion. So the two AIs talking about your blog. So are you able to just let viewers know where they can go so that they can listen to that in their own time?
Yeah, I'll have to download it, but yeah. I'm sorry about that. That's a shame. But yeah, I'll download it and I can share it with you, and you can put it out. But yeah, you can't get into my notebooks because they're private notebooks. But if you go in there, you can just upload anything. You're very welcome to upload my blog and just go into. It's free, so that tool's free. All the tools that I've showed today, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Notebook LM, you can access them all for free. So yeah, you can go and try it yourself and listen to the podcast and whatever you put in. It's super interesting.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for that. We did also have some really nice comments saying that our viewers loved the AI sandwich. So that's a good thing.
Good.
Okay, lovely. Could you just share your screen again, Kerry, just so that, because as we sort of kind of just wrap up the webinar, there's a QR code that I want the viewers to be able to see. So if you can just share your screen again for me, that would be great. But whilst Kerry is doing that, that is all the time that we have for our webinar today. So once you leave the webinar, you'll be asked to fill out just a very quick survey on the presentation, and we really appreciate any feedback that you can provide. Make sure to check out our content hub, which is where you can find plenty of articles, podcasts, resources to support you on your marketing journey. Also, the webinar is CPD eligible, so by submitting your CPD, you not only keep your learning and development up to date, but you can also start your journey towards our chartered marketer status, and you can find more details of this just by going on to your My CIM. So if you have enjoyed today's webinar and would like to continue your learning journey, then you can scan the QR code that Kerry has just very kindly put up on screen for you. The code will sign you up for Kerry's AI copywriting masterclass, where you'll learn advanced prompting techniques and gain a deeper understanding of responsible AI usage. And if it's as fascinating as this webinar has been today, then it'll be really, really beneficial. So all you need to do is just scan that QR code, and then that will take you through to the sign up for the AI copywriting masterclass. So finally, apologies for running over a little bit of time today, but I would just like to say on behalf of CIM, a very big thank you to Kerry. Fascinating presentation. It was absolutely brilliant. And most of all, to every one of you attending today. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.